Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 3rd of June. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local forecast information for your community and village and part of Alaska at weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. Call us on the info line at 800-472-0391. If you haven't put that in your phone yet, it's always a good time to do that. And you can find out information all around Alaska in between the Alaska Weather shows on Facebook at NWS Alaska. You can search for that on your phone easily. NWS Alaska on Twitter, as well as NWS Fairbanks, NWS Juneau, and NWS Anchorage. Not to mention, tsunami warnings are on Twitter as well. NWS_NTWC, or if you just look for the word tsunami, you'll likely find it that way as well. As soon as those alerts hit the airwaves, they're on Twitter as well. So that's a great way to get an instant notification or very close to near real time. AKwx is a conversation on Twitter about Alaska weather, and during the afternoon you can find more information on YouTube simply by looking for AKwx TV. And after this show, the complete broadcast is brought to you in part by our broadcast partner here at alaskapublic.org. You'll find it on their website too. The fire danger continues to grow across south and west. A very large fire there across southwestern Alaska continues there, but the danger itself is still present, even with rain moving northward. Some of that will certainly be abated, but again, we are still watching for high to at least partially extreme fire danger across the lower to middle Yukon Valley, as well as areas across the Alaska Range, and high fire danger in the upper Yukon Valley and the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, all the way out toward the Seward Peninsula and the northern parts of the Yukon Delta region, as well as northern sections of southeast. Now, southeast fire danger usually goes away pretty quickly in the season, and it will probably go away fairly quickly in the next several days as more and more rain starts to work its way into the east and southeast. Let's look out west first into the Bering Sea. And I want you to watch this area here. This is low cloud cover, and it is very indicative of cold air dropping through the Bering Strait. As you'll see in the visible satellite picture here in just a few minutes, there's a clear shield of stratus dropping southward. It says nothing but cold air is sneaking through there right now into a very stable air mass. So as that colder air is dropping southward, it's producing the clouds, the fog, and the stratus, and it shows up very nicely here, but a sign that things are going to get colder here across the west coast and parts of the Bering Sea. In the meantime, another weather system is developing south of the Kamchatka Peninsula. You can see that moisture pattern continuing to drop in from west to east and then taking a dip right across the North Pacific. We have a low pressure system across the Gulf of Alaska, so right now things are fairly quiet across the Bering, save for that cold air dropping southward. But if you see the weather pattern here, this will make a lot more sense. We have shifted the weather pattern that was stormy in the west to putting that a little bit more stormy in the east. So now we've got a stronger southerly flow moving back in and a fairly decent swath of moisture moving toward the north and western Gulf Coast, and eventually this will slide into southeast. So the dry days are numbered for southeastern Alaska, and there is going to be poor visibility and periods of pretty heavy rain across the eastern Kenai Peninsula and areas around Prince William Sound. In fact, tomorrow is not going to be the day to go out on a pleasure cruise, probably around Prince William Sound. Things do not look nice. And if you do go out, make sure that you're prepared for some pretty rough weather. Out across the Alaska Range, you can see moisture working up and over the higher terrain. The bubbly, kind of rough texture you see on the satellite picture here is indicative of building towers of clouds, towering cumulus clouds likely turning into showers, and in some cases we saw thunderstorms across southwestern Alaska again today. Same goes for areas around the Yukon, and watch the loop one more time because we want to talk about that fog coming through the Bering Strait. Watch this area here and you can see it very clearly. Look at that trail of cold air creating stratus and fog dropping right over St. Lawrence Island and then west of the Pribilof. So cold air dropping southward there, and several other waves will be working through. As we look at the weather map, you can see low pressure across the central and western Gulf. That's at 994 millibars there, and that's what's churning that moisture northward into the north and western Gulf. We've seen lightning strikes today from the office computers. Those are showing up around southwestern Alaska, the Alaska Range, and also around the Alcan border. There's several waves of low pressure rotating around this overall circulation. And for southeastern Alaska, you still have a ridge of high pressure that's kind of holding things back for now. But as this weakens, it's going to allow low pressure to move closer to southeastern Alaska, and the wind should come up as a result. As the low pressure front starts to work closer to the coast, the winds are going to pick up across the northern Gulf Coast, and this will also enhance the opportunity for rainfall, and some of that will be heavy at times across areas from Yakutat to Cordova and Valdez and into the eastern Kenai Peninsula. The low drops to 987 millibars, and we may still see a few evening thunderstorms around the Alaska Range, the Copper River Basin, and into southwestern Alaska. It's going to be cold enough across the North Slope that periods of rain may mix with snow this evening, and then perhaps a few areas will just be all snow showers across the northern coast. By tomorrow morning, chances are that will start out as rain mixed with snow and then quickly go back to rain, so it probably won't accumulate too much, if anything at all. But we will see areas of fog across the northern coast, and you'll notice that pressure gradients tightening up there across the Brooks Range. Watch for some winds to develop, and there might be some occasional turbulence there, but probably nothing too out of the ordinary. We are going to have some stronger winds across the west coast. That northerly flow is also going to bring temperatures down. It looks like the beginning of the coldest air is sitting just north of the Bering Strait, and this will gradually work its way southward. You'll see more of a northerly flow across the Aleutians as well. With low clouds and stratus, don't be surprised to see at least some drizzle, maybe some rain showers from time to time. It should be kind of hit and miss. And then across south central, it looks like a gray and cloudy day with periods of rainfall coming and going around Cook Inlet, but really focused around Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula, as well as the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range. And along the western side, you might see a chance for some showers and thunderstorms, and the same goes for areas around the Alcan border. For southeast, it looks like rain's moving into your weather picture there for Thursday. Periods of rain should be expected to continue into Friday as well. The center of low pressure will have moved ashore, and as that kind of refocuses a little bit more around the central Yukon, notice that colder air is organizing and dropping southward too. It doesn't have a whole lot of precipitation. The air is fairly dry there, but you'll probably see more clouds, and the temperatures will likely drop as that moves southward. A few showers and thunderstorms across the Alaska Range, and then for Friday across the North Slope, it looks like snow showers will mix with rain once again, mainly near the coast. Once you get inland, there's probably going to be enough warm air that most of what you'll see will be briefly rain mixed with snow, or perhaps all rain showers there. And again, rain continues for southeast with high pressure dropping well to the south and kind of losing control of the weather situation there in southeast. And we'll have widespread areas of fog across the south and eastern Bering, including areas around Bristol Bay and the YK Delta and Nunivak Island. So that's your weather picture for the next couple days. In the meantime, things were pretty nice across southeast today. Back in the mid-50s with periods of sunshine, especially for central and southern parts of southeast. 56 in Sitka, about the same there in Juneau. Ketchikan, Heidelberg, Hyder itself was up to 61. Prince William Sound saw temperatures in the lower 50s. It was 57 in Anchorage, nearly 60 in Homer today. Kenai saw 52. 57 around Gulkana and Glen Allen, 57 for Northway, 51 in Eagle. Up the road toward Fairbanks, it was 46 degrees. Healy around 50 degrees. Both areas saw a cool start this morning. 48 around Fort Yukon and 39 degrees for Arctic Village. The Arctic coast was looking at temperatures in the afternoon in the 20s and 30s. Barrow and Atkasuk were both at 29, 28 around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Kotzebue Sound temperatures saw readings in the 30s, 40s, with Kotzebue itself closer to 50. Ambler was 52, Bettles closer to 50 degrees. Nome was up to 57, about the same there for Unalakleet, 52 degrees actually, 52 in McGrath, and Galena was showing 56. Bethel was pretty toasty compared to other places in the YK today. 66 degrees. You go out toward the coast near Amonik and temperatures were around 50 degrees at best today. Mid-50s around Bristol Bay, including Dillingham and King Salmon. 52 in Kodiak, 40s and 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. The Pribilofs were in the mid-40s. Dutch Harbor and Unalaska is 48. Adak and Atka both in the mid to upper 40s, and Shemya only called in 42. Overnight low temperatures then will remain close to the lower 40s for the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island in the mid 40s. Southeast closer to 50 degrees tonight. South Central back in the mid 40s, with the interior pretty close to that thanks to that warm south wind. Up across the Brooks Range and the North Slope, only 20s are expected for many, and the Seward Peninsula will stay above freezing, but most areas there will hover at least in the mid to maybe even the upper 30s, with highs tomorrow really not changing a whole lot for the Aleutians, mid to upper 40s at best. Southwest back in the upper 50s and lower 60s. Notice though, along the Kuskokwim and the Yukon, you're looking at temperatures that are above 60 degrees in most locations, and by the time you get to Fairbanks, those readings are pushing 70 degrees. It's going to be a hot day, and there may be some thunderstorms in the region as a result. 56 degrees around Nome, 32 in Barrow. Looks like Ambler and Beddoes will just make it into the 40s to 50s. South Central, probably upper 50s to about 60 degrees at best. Again, there will be some clouds in the region. Prince William Sound, lower 50s, windy and wet for you. And for Southeast, look for high temperatures back in the mid 50s throughout the day. Kodiak up to 54. Now, flying weather tomorrow is going to be hit and miss around the northern Gulf Coast, but do expect a wide swath of IFR across the northern Gulf Coast, and that's where we're going to find turbulence as well. So be extra careful if you're flying around Prince William Sound or the eastern Kenai Peninsula tomorrow. In fact, there's going to be more turbulence issues and wind shear probably in the morning before things settle down a little bit more in the afternoon, and then worsen again as we head into tomorrow night. So if you're flying in South Central, make sure you're checking up on the weather before you go. MVFR conditions for central and northern parts of Southeast tomorrow as the clouds set in and thicken up. We'll see isolated convection and probably some turbulence and wind shear issues around those towers as well, so watch for those to develop. And IFR, obviously, with that stratus and fog dropping through the Bering Strait and also across the northern coastlines of the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Here's your pass conditions then. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to be MVFR through most of the day. There will be low clouds and precipitation in the region. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect that to return to IFR as we get into the afternoon. Watch for rain and thunderstorms in the region. Rainy Pass, more of the same. IFR conditions should develop during the daytime and last through a good part of the afternoon. Windy Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions develop there throughout the day, starting at around MVFR. Isabel Pass may be a little more clear in the morning than the afternoon. Showers and thunderstorms are possible. In Mentasta Pass, we expect that to lean over toward MVFR. Starting at VFR, though, in the morning, we'll be watching for thunderstorms in the region there, as well as Tanita Pass, looking at MVFR conditions by the afternoon. Portage Pass may see some of the ceilings lift during the midday hours again, as we expect turbulence to diminish a little bit. Worst conditions probably in the morning there. And as we go through Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions there for your Thursday. Now, freezing levels show that cold air dropping across the Bering Strait and southward still. Freezing levels are still as high as 4,000 to 6,000 feet for the central and western chain, 4,000 to 6,000 feet for the northern Gulf. And then they're starting to drop across the central and northern parts of Southeast, still holding at or about 5,000 to 6,000 feet there. And you can see the colder air is also lurking just north of the Brooks Range summits, anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 feet on the south side. So icing potential above 4,000 feet there. Most of that will be light to maybe isolated moderate, but we have a much greater chance for lift and moisture to combine with the cold air across South Central and the Alaska Range and the north and eastern Gulf Coast. Most of what you'll see around the Gulf will be above 6,000 feet. A little bit further west, it could be as low as 4,000 feet over Bristol Bay and parts of the Alaska Peninsula. The jet stream is showing the changes in our weather and driving the weather machine at the surface, and you can see that trough of low pressure across the northern Pacific, guiding in that very warm and wet air from the subtropical region right into the north and eastern Gulf Coast. In the meantime, we have a cold belt conveyor moving right through Bering Strait. Those wind speeds up to 65 knots. At 9,000 feet, northerlies rule the roost on the west coast. You can see those winds are up to 20 to 40 knots, and more of a southerly flow across the Gulf of Alaska. Those wind speeds really slow down once you get into the interior, 15 to 25 knots there, but fairly powerful out across the open waters of the Gulf, anywhere from 50 to 55 knots. At 3,000 feet, those winds are still coming in from the south and west into Prince William Sound and just east of Kodiak Island, around 20 to 30 knots. The stronger winds are a little bit further east, all the way from about Sitka and Juneau southward at 35 to 45 knots. Relatively light winds across the interior, with winds over the Brooks Range about 25 to 30 knots, and northerlies are still coming down the west coast and very light winds out across the central and western chain. So as far as turbulence goes in South Central, things will be the worst in the morning, improve during the day, and then probably start to worsen again during the evening and overnight hours. Most of what you'll see will be problems below 6,000 feet. A fairly well-mixed atmosphere there will probably promote pretty deep areas of wind shear or turbulence, so be careful, especially around Prince William Sound and the Copper River Basin. And we'll see developing problems across northern parts of southeast all the way along that frontal boundary across the eastern Gulf. And watch for some turbulence there to show up thanks to faster moving winds around St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew, and all the way down toward the Pribilofs with at least light to isolated moderate. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again talking about the Augmented Reality Sandbox is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level. Say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version.
Sweet.
Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this Sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, I mean, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that and to see how it reacts in time, and
right.
It's a dynamic learning tool, and it responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have? You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts. He meant Saturday. Make sure you tune in on Saturday. We've got some good stuff coming your way on Thursday with stargazers and Friday hangar flying. Saturday, you'll get to see more of that. In the meantime, the sea ice edge continues to change. It's colder now right here than it was about a week ago. And that's moving the ice edge a little bit back to the west. So you can see open water out to the west. The opening still through the Bering Strait. We've got some ice just across the northern parts of the Seward Peninsula into the Kotzebue Sound region. And we'll be waiting for changes here, surely, in the next few weeks across the Chukchi Seacoast. But not today. For the very latest ice edge information, go to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. At the top, you can click a link that'll take you to an interactive map. Good, fun stuff there. Thursday's marine forecast in southeast is going to be breezy, especially through bays and passes there. If you're in one of those windy spots when storms come ashore, tomorrow's going to be your day. 30 to 35 knots for most areas on the outer coast, up to 40 knots for areas outside of Yakutat. The southeast wind, 18-foot seas there. On the inner waterways, you're looking at winds around Cross Sound at 20 knots with a 7-foot sea, 30 knots in Clarence Strait, 6-foot seas there. And through Lynn Canal, winds up to 30 knots with a southerly flow and 6-foot seas. As we get into Friday, watch for a few changes along the coast because remember that front's coming ashore, so that's going to bring in more of a south and southwesterly flow. But winds diminish down to about 15 knots. Southerlies remain in Lynn Canal. The winds in the interior shift to the south and west, and southeasterlies continue in Clarence Strait, still holding around 20 knots. Now, gales continue for areas outside of Prince William Sound on the northern Gulf Coast. You're going to see gusts, though, up to 50 to about 55 knots. 55 knots for many areas there, certainly outside of Montague Island, inside Montague Island. Don't be surprised to see gusts on the order of 50 knots there with a sustained easterly wind up to 40 knots with a 9-foot sea. Otherwise, southeasterlies coming into Resurrection Bay at 25 knots across the eastern Kenai Peninsula, and northerlies strengthening through Cook Inlet, 30 to 35 knots with 8-foot seas in the north, 14-foot seas south of Calgon Island, 12-foot seas west of the Barrens with higher gusts there around Kodiak Island, west and southwesterlies at 20 knots. Once we get into Friday, things really improve fairly quickly. So this is going to be a short-lived event, but again, especially tomorrow morning, watch for some of those higher seas and higher winds around Prince William Sound and the northern Gulf Coast and outside of Resurrection Bay. The conditions will pretty much dramatically improve by the end of the day, but again, the morning looks to be the worst time. By Friday, southerlies continue there across the northern coast at 20 knots, southeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound, and light southerly winds are moving back up Cook Inlet and over Kodiak Island at 15 to 20. Alaska Peninsula looking at light winds inside of Bristol Bay, northwesterlies north of Cold Bay, and west and southwesterlies in the North Pacific at 20 knots. By Friday, winds are still fairly light, 15 to 20 knots all areas. Southerlies inside of Bristol Bay and west of Castle Cape, and west and southwesterly winds are moving across the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. You'll see 7-foot seas on the North Pacific side. Across the Aleutians, north and westerly winds from the eastern to the western parts of the chain. Looking at winds around 15 to 20 knots, most areas 6 to 7 feet in the Bering Sea side and 6 to 7 feet on the Pacific side. For Friday, winds still remain pretty light in the west, only 10 to 15 knots. In fact, some cases may see light and variable winds. Northwesterlies from Nikolsky to Unalaska, and on the north and south side, you're looking at about 6 to 8 foot seas to wrap up the week. Across the west coast, northerlies continue to push cold weather south across the Bering, 25 to 35 knots with the strongest around St. Lawrence Island. Look for 7-foot seas there, 9-foot seas around the Pribilofs. For Friday, a little bit of a northwesterly shift north of Nunivak Island, 20-knot winds there, and west of St. Paul and St. George, you'll see 7-foot seas there for Friday. Across the north slope, east and northeasterly winds coming from the Beaufort to the Chukchi Seacoast, around 20 to as high as 25 knots just outside of Kotzebue Sound. A 5-foot sea there on Thursday and about the same on Friday. Winds come up a little bit more from the north outside of Kotzebue Sound. Otherwise, northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi Seacoast at 25 knots, and east and northeasterly winds still moving over the Beaufort. Recapping tonight's weather, a stronger area of low pressure is working into the north and western Gulf Coast. That's going to bring periods of heavy rain and probably some high winds across the northern coast into Prince William Sound and the eastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula. The heaviest rain will affect you there with several inches on order. Rain will spread eastward into southeastern Alaska, and a few thunderstorms will continue for southwest and areas around the Alcan border and the Alaska Range. Up north, cold enough for a little snow to mix in with rainfall in the morning, then it turns back to rain and fog during the day. Showers and thunderstorms are back across the Alaska Range, and again for Friday with more rain through the North Gulf Coast. Enjoy your day.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.